Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are having a look at another Devblog for updates direct hit, and this is for the BV-138C-1. This is a new hydroplane or a flying boat that is coming to Germany at rank 1. It isn't going to be a premium, it is going to be in the tech tree, and it's coming in as a vehicle that I don't think will be that useful, but will be a little bit of fun, and also will have a place in naval forces. Let's get into the history of this ridiculous machine. The development of the BV-138 started in the early 30s, in 1934. This was when the German Air Ministry issued a set of requirements for the development of a new flying boat which would take advantage of the recently developed and highly economical Junkers Jumo 205 diesel engines. The task was given to Dornier as well as Hamburg Flugzeugbau, which eventually became Blohm & Voss. Development of the aircraft ensued throughout the mid-1930s, and the first prototype was completed and test flown in 1937. And at the same time, Dornier's test failed to impress the Air Ministry, and this meant that Blohm & Voss's design was the only one still taking part in the competition. In the late 1930s, the first pre-series aircraft was built and tested, resulting in the aircraft missing entering service before the outbreak of World War II in September of 1939. The first production model of the aircraft left the factory in 1940 and joined the service with the Luftwaffe as the BV-138A-1. The aircraft of the pre-series was the first to see active service, being employed as part of Operation Verresrebung in April of 1940, and subsequent versions of the aircraft, including the most produced variant, which was the BV-138C-1, were employed in the North Sea and also Baltic regions, as well as in the English Channel, to perform maritime reconnaissance, rescue, and also mine-sweeping missions. Production of the BV-138 finished in 1943, and they built over 290 units through various variations of the machine. With the BV-138C-1 coming to War Thunder, all I've got to say is I'm pretty happy. It's always nice to see Blohm & Voss get a little bit more representation in the game because of their weird and wacky designs. Blohm & Voss, as a company, the shipbuilders, are normally known for making just ridiculous, quirky, and interesting stuff. Some of the designs that I've seen over the years that came out of that company were incredibly fun, even if they were never built. And the BV-138 is an example of a weird and quirky design that was built, and therefore seeing it represented is always lovely. Now, the BV-138 may not have the best characteristics, when it comes to its actual engines, they're pretty weak, the flight characteristics of the vehicle are not going to be the best, but at the same time, it does have a decent defensive armament, and also will have a use in naval battles, which is something that, you don't see too often when it comes to the game. Normally, air realistic, air arcade, ground realistic, ground arcade is normally emphasized when we have a look at these vehicles, because that's where they're going to see most use. When it comes to the 138, this thing could easily be used in naval arcade, naval realistic, to quite a high potency, even to the highest of BRs. And the main reason for this is it's a hydroplane. And one of the things about hydroplanes, no matter how fast they are, no matter how good they are at moving around, no matter how mobile they have one of the key things you need in naval forces to be able to win a lot of the battles. They can capture points. And a lot of battles, especially at the destroyer and cruiser BR, are based around the idea of being able to capture points. So with a plane like this, which will probably be quite cheap on the SP costs, you'll be able to get there pretty quickly and be able to capture stuff and put your team at an advantage. It also has a few other little ideas to it which make it, quite fun. Even though, as I said, it does have 880 horsepower each in each engine, but it can only go a top speed of 285 kilometers an hour. hour, which is nothing, which is very useful. But the main thing that's interesting about it is its defensive armament. This thing actually has two 20mm MG151s, and if you've played against or with MG151s, you know how powerful they are. These are not guns that you really want to deal with, and the actual coverage they have is pretty good. It doesn't have a lot of defense below it. Obviously, you should be pretty low to the ground or low to the sea most of the time, so that isn't too much of an issue, but the top coverage is excellent with the two 20mm, and also it has a 13mm as well backing that up. So you just got to be a little bit careful with this machine. Think about stuff like the Ju-288 and how hard that thing is to approach from the back, and generally you only have one 20mm firing at you at a time. That's pretty much what this machine has, apart from this one was at 1.7 when it came to the dev server. So it's definitely one of those vehicles which should be feared when it comes to its turrets. It also has access to a very, very small bomb load. The bomb load on this thing, I believe, is 650 kilo bombs. That's not anything that is that useful. It might be able to destroy some PT boats. It might be to just get a little bit of extra damage on the vehicle. But I feel like when it comes to the bombs, at least they made them stock now. Before you actually had to unlock them, which was a bit of a problem. But I feel like people are going to drop them, you know, maybe try and hit some very light ground targets or a base, and then they're going to go gunfighter mode with this thing. Make it a little bit of a gunship, so when people attack it, you know, the 20mm can go crazy. And I think that would be pretty fun, you know. I think that would be something which I'd like to see. One of the other things as well that was brought up a few times in stuff like Q&As and on the forums and areas like that was the need for hydroplanes. The fact that there isn't a ton of them in the game, you know, there isn't a massive amount of them. And one of the problems with this is it means certain nations don't have access to these mechanics, therefore can't be as useful in naval battles. And I think that's definitely a fair shout. You know, when it comes to the German tech tree, you know, you have the BV, the big six-engined bomber, which is a premium, and then you've got the HE-51 float plane, which is an event vehicle. You don't really have too many options when it comes to the flying boat idea, which are easily accessible, and therefore adding this thing into the game to create that option I think is really, really good. And I'm happy to see it because of that. And I hope it starts a trend where we see this for other nations as well. Because there are some other nations that do have some decent hydroplanes, but there is a lot that they could add into the game. And one of the other mechanics that we kind of saw going on as well, to put it into perspective on what they're looking at when it comes to, you know, stuff like the BV-138. We saw that on the dev server, not this time, but the last time, they're working on some kind of mechanic to be able to launch planes from ships. Now, obviously, stuff like the BV-138 I think is a bit too big for that, but it also could give us an inkling in what we're going to see in the future when it comes to these hydroplanes. Maybe not just stuff like the recon vehicles, which are similar to the BV-138, but more like the single-engined hydroplanes, which would be used for scouting and also a little bit of dogfighting, and generally used to capture zones in naval. And for me, that would be really cool. You know, it would add a new part of gameplay to naval. It would add something fresh and something interesting, and also a bunch of different ways of playing the game. You know, a bunch of different metas and a bunch of different ways to approach how to play, and that would be really awesome. So even though these hydroplanes generally don't have the best characteristics when it comes to their mobility, when it comes to their speed, generally they do have something that is interesting about them. And to me, when it comes to the BV-138, that is the fact it has a pretty damn good defensive armament, and also the guy on one of the MGs sat on the turret is getting blasted by one of the engines constantly, which can't be very fun. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank BRFC, Swollen Ostrich, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Conte Baraka, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Lafouche, Barine, and Samuel Schlick for supporting the channel.